Okay, I'm outside and it's a whopping 20 degrees outside with a wind chill maybe down to 12. Got a little breeze going on, and yeah, maybe close to an inch of snow last night. We're a few days after Christmas here, and Santa Claus was nice enough to bring bicycles for the kids. So that leads me to my next project, which I am not going to do outside. Since my garages are full and I'm not going to back my cars out in the snow, I'm just going to go do a project in the sunroom where it's warmer than it is out here. Okay, the first bike I'm going to deal with here is a 26-inch bicycle. Towel came shipped. It's one of two that I got, and the first thing I did was exactly what the box says not to do. Box says do not cut open. Well, I hate these stupid staples, so I started at one corner and looked in. I mean, yeah, I don't want to cut into the box because the tire's close to one edge, but you know, I don't always read the instructions. I cut from one corner, lifting the box up and looking to see where I'm cutting to make sure I'm not cutting into a tire, and showing exactly what it looks like, how it came. And I'm going to pull it out of here and assemble it for you and show you how to assemble this, adjust it, whatever needs to be done so that way it can be ridden. Okay, I'm going to show a few different angles from this position to get the bike out. I'm going to move the camera around just to be able to give you the best shot or angle on what I'm trying to accomplish while I'm assembling this bike. So for right now, I'm just going to pull the bike out of the box. There's a few different ways you can do it. Pull it straight out or flip the bike upside down. Just be mindful if you're flipping the box upside down, you've got the top of the seat post and the headset here in the front, that if you've got nice floors or anything, you're going to end up scratching your floors if you dump the box out to get the bike out of it. So I'm just going to lift the bike out of the box, and it's all tied together, zip ties and everything. So you're going to have to cut zip ties after it comes out of the box just to separate the pieces that are all in here. They packed it so it shouldn't get damaged in delivery, and you know, you'll see when I pull it out on how well they packed it. So just pull the bike out and grab it. The web box aside, and there's pretty much how it's packed. Okay, now that I got the bike out of the box, I'm just going to set it aside here for a second. In the box, seat post. I see I love the instructions. Helmet. Don't forget to wear a helmet. Whatever. Here's the instructions for the bike. And I see there's a few parts laying in the box. Something wasn't assembled. Okay, so laying down inside the box, luckily not lost, our front brake. I'm assuming it's the front. Looks like the rear brake are intact. The front is missing the brake shoe on one side. And in the box are washers for that. Washer hidden. So a couple zip ties broke off. This little cap was a protector somewhere. And another instruction book in Spanish. Okay, now Ziploc bag, I guess everything was in the instructions and all that stuff. I'm going to cut the box up here and use it. Okay, now granted I have carpet here on the floor, and you know, not everybody's going to work on carpet. Some people have hardwood floors, and you know, different places where you're going to work on it. You know, a garage floor, you know, concrete. So you don't want to just throw the bike down onto a surface that you're going to scratch it up, or you're actually going to mark up the bike by just assembling it on a surface. So I'm going to give myself a surface. I'm going to utilize the box. I'm going to cut up the largest piece of the box. You really don't need a huge piece. You just one side of the box. I'm just going to cut it up and use it as a surface to work on, a surface for the bike. So give myself a razor knife. I'm going to take this, set it here for now. Got myself a work area. Throw the box down, put the seat aside for a second here. Okay, the way they got it packed, you get the crank arm coming here through the spokes, and you're going to want to just slide the wheel off around that. So I got my wheel off, and for right now, if you want to leave this extra wrap on the bike, it's not going to hurt anything because it's not going to be in the way. You can see my forks are backwards, so you got them. The kind of handlebars are laying down in one spot. The forks are facing another way, so get your forks turned around so the brake caliper is in the front. Okay, so I've changed position. I moved the bike a little further on the cardboard. Now, granted, I have it leaning against the window. I don't always have somebody to help me with doing work to this stuff. Now, with the seat out of the box, you can see the reflector is not tightened up, partly because of where you're going to have your seat in relation to your height. So I'm just going to slide this in. Okay, give myself an approximate height. My kids aren't that tall. So, okay, got it about where I want it. Let's see how tight. See, the seat still moves even though I got the clamp down, so I'm going to tighten the clamp up a little bit. Try it again. Now that feels a little tighter. The seat does not move, but I want to make it sure it's straight, so I'll turn the seat a little straighter and then tighten the clamp back down. Okay, now the seat clamp is on, seat is on. Now the reason for this is I'm going to flip the bike over so I can put the front wheel on. That's an easy process. Just take the bike, flip it. Now I've got it flipped, both the seat on the cardboard and the handle grips on the cardboard. Not on asphalt, not on your kitchen floor. You know, I'm protecting the seat because it's a brand new seat. I don't want to mark it all up. Brand new handle grips. I got my front wheel, I got my pair of cutters, and the reason I got my cutters is that the pedals are zip tied to the tire and the rim. Pull that out, put my pedals aside for a minute. Now, if you've got a little OCD and you want, you know, I've got my tire tread going the same direction as the tire tread on the back side of the tire here, the rear tire. All right, you want to pull off these little plastic caps that are on each side that protected the bike frame and shipment. You're going to pull this little protector off. Okay, now on here there's these little washers that have a hook. See if you can see it in the video here. That little hook goes into a little hole right here. Is loosen your nuts enough to give you space to get that washer out, because when you go to put it in the frame here, you're going to want to get that in this hole. The reason I'm showing this view here is because even with this one brake shoe missing, it's still going to be tight to get the tire in here. So it's just so much easier to release this, and all I'm going to do is just push a little bit and slide this out. It just fits in a little tiny groove there. So now I have all the room in the world to fit that in. Okay. Now I got the space here. I got everything situated. I'm going to move my washers outwards from both sides. Make sure you got them. Okay. Now the washer's outwards enough, I can get it around and into the little hole. Alright, see it hooked in. It's in that little hole. You can finger tight that up. Do the other side. The whole purpose of those little hooks is when they're in, that somehow that the wheel doesn't accidentally just, you know, pull out. I don't know. I kind of understand why they're there, but kind of don't. If you put these on tight enough, if these loosen up to the point where they pull out, the wheel's going to fall off anyway. So anyway, it's just one more safety precaution for somebody. Okay, so this is where the crescent wrench comes in handy. You're supposed to use a crescent wrench to adjust it and put it on there. Or you can just get yourself a 15mm wrench, open end wrench. It's 15mm, or in my case, you can flip it over to your box end. Either way. Pull your paperwork out of here. You don't need this anymore. Alright, so just showing you that. Tighten it up snug. You know, I'm pretty strong here, and you can crank down these pretty hard, and you know, they're tough. I wouldn't kill them because they just have to be on there. Probably, I don't know, I bet you there's probably some kind of foot-pounds of torque somewhere. You know, I'm sure 50 foot-pounds is safe. Alright, now the wheel's on. Part of the work's done. We hooked the front brake up here, but not yet. I'm going to flip the bike over to do that. Plus, I can see, I'll show it to you, but they don't even have the brake pad in the right position. So, next is we're going to put the pedals on. Alright, now the next step is getting the pedals on. And the pedals come packed in heat shrunk plastic. Alright, now on the pedal, you can see here, it's got right tighten, left tighten. It's because the threads are different directions. They actually, exactly what it sounds like. Right tighten or clockwise, left tighten counterclockwise. Now you can see here on the pedal, on the pedal, it's got left tighten, right tighten. So on the crank arm, you've got left. Okay, so you're going to want to put your pedal on, and you're going to turn it counterclockwise. So you get your left tighten, left pedal crank, or left crank arm, turning it counterclockwise. Alright, so as you install this, and this is back to where they say, and this is what I was trying to explain earlier is they say to use a crescent wrench in the instructions, and I don't like the crescent wrench because if you look at the open end wrench compared to the crescent wrench, if I can show it on the video here, you see the thickness of the crescent wrench and the thickness of the open end wrench. This is one of my smaller crescent wrenches, and I have one that's even smaller yet, but I want to be able to crank on the pedal because you want this pedal on there pretty tight. And the same 15 millimeter wrench that you used if you use an open end wrench, and I'm saying thickness here is because the crescent wrench will work, but I'm not all the way fully, I'm going the wrong direction here. I'm not all the way fully cranked in, okay? Now I want to keep my kid's bike in nice shape, and I don't want to start it by scratching it up. And what I'm saying scratching here is as I'm cranking this pedal in, I still have another little more than an eighth inch to go, but this wrench is already touching the crank arm and the edge of the pedal here. There is no more room for this to fit. So that's what I said. Go to a boxed end, open end wrench and finish installing your pedal. Don't use a crescent wrench like the instruction says unless you have a crescent wrench that is small enough. Now I put it on there pretty snug. That pedal's not coming off. Now factory, nicely labeled, both sides right and left, and the pedals right and left. So over here the right crank arm, the right pedal, which installs clockwise. Okay. All right. If you're trying to get this tight, if you're trying to crank it like this, you're going with the leverage of the pedal. The whole thing, you're going to have a hard time holding it. So go against it. So now you're going against the leverage of the pedal arm to tighten that. If that makes sense. Okay. So now your pedals are installed. Both of them are installed nice and tight. And now we can flip the bike over and put it on the wheels. There's any number of ways you can flip the bike over. Lay it on the side, flip it, whatever. I'm just going to, let's do this. Now, it comes with a handy dandy kickstand. Here is this little protective cap with a piece of cardboard stuck in it. It's the, I'm sure it's really to keep the kickstand from, when it's in this position, keep the kickstand from punching a hole in the cardboard box. You know, you can leave it on to protect your floor when you're working on it, when you're putting it together, helping it stand upright. Take it off when you're done, because it's really trash, you know. Here's a kickstand on the back. Now that it's upright, put the kickstand down. And that piece that fell off was the cover here for shipping. Alright, now the bike is right side up, and I'm going to hook the front brake up first. I'm going to get the cable that I disconnected. I'm going to get it hooked back together. It's pretty simple. Back together. It's got a little sleeve on here. I guess it's a little dust boot to keep the dust out of the cable. Alright, next step is going to be putting this missing brake pad on. Now look here at the pieces that came with the brake pad. You have a short little washer that goes, make sure I'm getting this on video. here's the brake shoe, and you have a short little washer that goes on, but that little washer is actually dished in shape, and then there's a second washer that goes in that. Okay, that washer's dished the opposite direction. That goes onto that, and you can see the reason for that is allows this shoe to be adjusted to follow the direction, follow the rim. Now the problem I have here is that in the shipment, that washer had on the opposite end had one in here also. That was lost in shipment. So it was lost in shipment, and the only thing I can do is put a washer on top of that and the nut that holds everything in place. Alright, now on top of that, you see the brake has a kind of an arc to it. There's a space down here, and this has kind of an arc that follows the shape of the rim. So if you were to put this on like this, the rim is going to go like this, and it's going to lose some of the braking on this. So I'm going to put this in like that. Squeeze it in here. I may actually have to take this back off real quick to fit this in here. Alright, now I can put this back on, and we can see here tighter snug to get that. Alright, so put my one washer on, kind of doing this in a position where I can't really see it. Okay, I've changed camera position to give you a better view of what I'm doing here on the brakes. You can see the curvature of the rim here, and that's why I was saying that brake shoe has to have the brake pads in line with the curvature of the rim. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move the brake pad up to approximately where I want it. Now, because of that cupped disc that's in there, it allows the brake shoe to move like this or up and down for an adjustment. And then once you tighten this, now I put the piece that I have, and the piece that I'm missing is not in there, so I'm just doing what I have to do to get this back together. But possibility that all your brake shoes are going to need to have this adjustment done, and I can show you why. And here's another case where what they recommend as a tool is not going to really work in here. So even if you have this is a 10mm nut, if you have a 10mm wrench, it's kind of going to be tight to work in there too. So you're going to break out yourself a 10mm socket and tighten this up. And as you tighten it up, make sure that your brake shoe doesn't turn in adjustment as you tighten this. Make sure it doesn't turn, because then it won't be in line with the rim and the area where it wants to stop to use for braking. So I press this against the rim to get an alignment, to get it so it's following the rim correctly and not angled, and I tighten it up, so we should be good there. Okay, now I'm going to turn this, and hopefully we can see it on the video. If you look at the brake shoe on this side, and this is from the factory, they just slapped it in here. And this is the problem you're going to run into. So what you're going to want to do is loosen the brake shoe. It's stuck up against the tire actually. Bring it down to where it's got to be. Push it against the rim so it's where you want it to be alignment wise. Push it against the rim, and then that, like I said, it adjusts the the shoe, the angle of the shoe, to be properly stopping it, and tighten it back up. Make sure it doesn't move. If you have to, you could put your finger under to tighten. Oops, I'm bumping the camera. All right, now you can see that our brake shoes are going to stop on the rim. They're going to actually grab on the rim and not on the tire or being misaligned. All right, I'm going to try and show you two things at one time here. Even if you were to squeeze this in and get the brake shoes against the rim so you can get your adjustment out of this, you're not going to get it into this cable assembly. Okay, and when I say you're not getting the cable assembly, you need this brake line goes into here, but this cable has to stretch across to here. So what you're going to have to do is break out the 5mm, put it into your and let your cable go slack. With your cable slack, you have this here that has a groove where this fits into from the bottom side. Actually, you can see the groove. So you're going to want to pull your cable out a little bit, fit that in the groove. Now we're in the groove. You're going to want to lay it into this, okay? And this part turns. This is an adjustment, okay? Now, with that adjustment, you can see there's a groove cut in both this and this. And the purpose of that is to line that up so you can slip your cable completely in and through. All right. Now that it's in, turn a little bit, you're hooked up. Now that the top side is hooked up, we want to go back down to the bottom, and we're going to take the slack out of this cable. Now you don't want it so tight it's tight up against the rim. You want to leave a little space on each side so it's not rubbing as you ride. And you want to snug this up just to give yourself an idea. I would leave about an 1/8 inch of space on each side between, and you can give it a light pull. Okay. Loosen a little bit and take a little bit more out of it. Okay. So I got about an 1/8 inch of space out of each side, and I got about half a pull on the brake lever. You can see here I got about a half a pull on the brake lever. Now if you need more of an adjustment, this is tight. If you need more of adjustment, you can adjust this to take out some of the slack. You can adjust this here to take out some of the slack to give you a little bit harder, a little bit more grab to the brake, or you can adjust it inward, and then wherever you get it, the smaller collar, you can lock it in position so it doesn't move from the adjustment. So our brakes are adjusted in the front, top and bottom. Got room. You can spin the rim and it doesn't hit, doesn't rub. Okay. Now on this you have from the factory, these are loose. That's all according to rider comfort. where your position your fingers are. Now you imagine if you're sitting on the bike, you know, some people, it just depends on how they ride. If you're sitting on the bike, you're sitting somewhere, you know, you don't want it up here because you're not, that's kind of uncomfortable way to ride. Either straight ahead or slightly downward for both of them. So if you're riding, you can see the comfort. You want to just go and reach. You don't want to have interference or whatever. You just put it where it's comfortable. So, okay, when you got it where you feel you're in a comfortable position, get your 5mm. And it's just the one. You don't have to kill these because this is all plastic, and you just want to get it snug tight so that they don't move around on the handle grips. I'm not putting a lot of force, but they're tight and they're not moving. All right, so the brakes are done. Well, the front brake is done. We haven't done an adjustment on the back brake yet. We could take this plastic off the handlebar, and then you have this little tag. You want to take that off. All right. Now from the front, real quick, I just want to show the way the brakes are working. They pretty much pull equally. They both are moving. So when you just stop the bike, they're moving properly. They're moving equally. Now I'm going to spin the bike around and show you the back. Now if you look at the back brake, if you look on the video here, I don't know if you can see the back brake on the video here. This side's not moving because it's already touching the rim. So they have it adjusted too tight from the factory. You want to have some space. Plus my fingers are pretty far out on the brake lever. So we're going to adjust this just a little bit. Alright, before I adjust this brake, what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust this pad up a little bit. The brake pad is touching the rim and it's a little bit low, so I'm just going to move it up a little bit, make sure it's in alignment. Like I said, I'm going to squeeze it against the rim so I can tighten it up. Alright, nice and snug. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Alright, now you may or may not be able to see in the video, but from the factory, this brake shoe is adjusted kind of on an angle. It's not following the curvature of the rim. So I'm going to just move it so it's an adjustment. Looks like it's in a good spot. Hold it to the rim. Tighten it up. Okay, so now after I've done that, and the reason I did that is because they were both kind of out of alignment. This one was actually touching the rim on this side, and what we're getting to now is adjustments. And the reason I say adjustments is if you can look here, you see. Now, to some people, they may not care. I like things to work properly. So if you look at both brake arms here, the levers, the action of the movement, as I squeeze, this arm is moving more and it's pulling itself away from the rim, so it's not going to drag on the actual rim. You can hear the rim is being stopped by the brake pad on this side because it's not pulling itself away from the tire. You want both of these to work properly. You want both of them to move away from the rim properly. And here we go to adjustments. And when I say adjustments is, you know, they just assemble this really fast, and you know assembly lines, or you may not. I don't know. They assemble it quickly. They slap it together. They get it out of there and onto the next bike. So here we're going down to adjustments. This one's moving properly, pulling itself away from the rim, and this one is not. So here you just want to turn, get yourself a Phillips head screwdriver, and on the side here you can turn up the spring pressure for adjustment to pull itself back. Now we have a little bit better movement. You can see it actually moving now. Where before it was just frozen against the rim. So now we're good, except for it's dragging a little bit. So what I'm going to do is find my 5mm Allen key, wherever I sat it. And I'm just going to loosen this just a little bit, give it a little bit more space. Doesn't have to be much. I don't want the brakes dragging on the rim. And I'm going to tighten the spring pressure on this one a little bit. So let's check the movement. Got good movement. Sounds pretty good. Looks pretty good. It's not rubbing. Stopping. So our brakes front and rear are tuned up. Now on to the derailleurs, I guess. And when I say derailleurs, I mean the adjustment of the derailleurs, because your derailleurs on my other bike were not adjusted properly at all. Alright, one last thing. When you do your brakes, tighten the locking adjustment on the brake lever. The little collar just on the rear brake side, you want to just tighten that collar so the adjustment doesn't move. Now, to start on the derailleurs, I can snip off a little cover here, get that out of the way. I'm not going to pull the paper off yet. Now, when I explained, you can see the nice curve here of the cables. You have the brake side, you can see moving here, nice curve, no binding. The rear derailleur curve, nice curve. The front derailleur, nice curve. So, and that's the reason why I have it going around the handlebars. Now, I don't like from the factory, I don't like cables crossing. And on here, you can see I have the two. I could have had the center cable crossing over and binding itself, pushing downward on the opposite side of the handlebar. I didn't do that, and now that I have it a nice curve going one way, when you move the steering head, it moves properly, doesn't bind, all that good stuff. But I don't like how right here on the frame, let's see if I can get this, right here on the frame I have the way it crosses, it crisscrosses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the rear derailleur to the center, and I'm going to move the front derailleur cable to the side here. So to go this way, and the outside goes this way. It just flows better, moves better on the bike, and it, you know, the cables are all in a better position. So it's pretty simple to do. Plus, the reason I'm going to do it is they don't have it situated on the bike properly anyway. For the front derailleur, the cable is going routed the wrong way, and I'll show you that here in a second. But all I'm going to do is relax this cable completely and just pull it out. Okay, so that's completely out. Now, same with the center cable. I'm going to pull it from the back. Probably should have turned a little bit. All I did was pull it from the back to move it out. So I'm going to move this up. Okay, now that I have that up, I'm going to put the front back in the center. So that's the rear derailleur cable in the center. You have this frame protector, plastic, in its right spot. And got this back in. Okay, so I've got that cable in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the front end up here. Okay, now we're running the same problem here, crisscrossing, but it's no longer crisscrossing in the front here. So you can see the front cables now how they are. To me, much better. In the back here, I'm going to show you what I did, or what I have to do. Now that I've moved the bike around to try and give a better position and change the camera position, I've got the rear derailleur cable coming up and going into the center here on the frame. Okay, I have this one here that is going to crisscross, and I don't want it to crisscross. I'm going to change the position. You can see if I can get this on the camera here. From the factory, they have the cable coming around this little keeper, which over time it's going to chafe its way through the cable. So I'm going to change the position of it so it goes under that keeper and be proper. So I got to disconnect this anyway because they have this cable in incorrectly. Take this nut off, and the reason I'm taking this nut off, I'm going to loosen it to take the cable out of here, and I'm going to pull this out, pull the cable up through. I'm going to change the position the way the cable runs. That's all. It's not a big deal. Just break it loose, pull the cable out, lift it up, slide this out. Now, coming straight down the rail, I can put my cable in the right position, to me right position. Okay, so it comes, even though it crisscrosses, there's room here. It's not a tight bind right on it, so it comes through the frame properly, comes down here nicely, comes down to this. All right, this is what I was saying. The way the factory had it, the wire came around and went over top of this. And if you felt this, it's got a sharp edge. It'll cut right through this wire if you start using it. So all I'm going to do is hook it like it's supposed to be on the underside of that wire, that tab. The wire goes on the underside between the washer and the nut. I'm going to tighten it back up. We may have to loosen and adjust it again if needed. But for right now, just putting it like this. I'm going to tighten it. Just snug. You don't have to kill it, because all you're going to do is crush the wire. You want it to hold enough that the wire is not going to pull out. So when you make the adjustment, the derailleur moves. Okay. Now that that's done, I'll show you the position of the wires. They're much cleaner, much neater. It flows from here up under. It doesn't bind or rub. You know, there's plenty of clearance here. It doesn't bind or rub. It goes into these here and flows nicely up around the handlebars, so you can steer and they're not crisscrossing and chafing on each other. So that's that. Now we want to make sure our front derailleur and our rear derailleur are moving properly and they travel too far to make the chain jump off. There's actually adjustments on these. If need be, we can move the adjustments so that way the chain doesn't go too far when you turn the controls up on the handle grips. So right as we speak, our brakes are working properly, front and rear, and I don't think there's any reason why you would have to adjust this. I'm a 250-pound person, and where this is set, I've sat on this, and my kids are going to ride this. I've sat on this pretty much where this adjustment is. If you loosen this adjustment, then that spring is just going to become loose where it's at. Right now it's at probably the least tension on this spring, so you don't want to really move this adjustment. I would think you wouldn't want to move this adjustment unless you thought you were a 300-pound rider and you needed to adjust this up to give you more tension because of the sag. Because I sit on this bike and this really doesn't move much. Probably a quarter to a half inch. There's really not a lot of movement in that. So I would leave that alone. But right now as we stand, our cables are good, front and rear. Adjustments are good, brakes are good, seat is good. Now we have our reflectors, which is literally just a Phillips head, and you set the position and then tighten it up, which is simple enough. We'll do that here in a second. And that's reflectors front and rear from the factory. They're set loosely on here, and it's just a point of just tightening a screw. So we'll do that here. Reflector, basically, you want to make it appear face pretty much as straight to the rear as possible, and all you're going to do is just tighten the Phillips head up. These are only plastic mounts, so you only want to tighten it to the point of being snug, and the reflector does not move or slide up or down on that. And same goes for the one in the front. Same thing. You want the reflector to face forward. Make sure it faces forward. It looks pretty centered and straight. Your position up or down, if you want to move it up or down. I don't have much play because I didn't leave much play in the headset. And like I said, just tighten it up. Until it doesn't move. Don't overly tighten it. You don't want to break the plastic because it's only plastic. So as we stand, brakes are done. Rims are on. Reflectors are tight. Seats tight. Just a little checklist here of what we've done so far. And now we want to make sure our derailleurs function properly. So what I mean is if I take my derailleur, my front one, let's say, and I put it on 2, does it move to 2? It's pretty close. A little click upwards. All right, we're on 2. Back off. Doesn't appear to be rubbing anywhere. Okay, try 3. Almost fully on 3. It's not binding or rubbing. We're pretty good. Go back down to 1. All right, our front derailleur seems to be working properly. There's, if need be, move my paper here. There's, see if you can see it on the camera here. There's 2 little screws there for adjustment. You can see them right here. These 2 screws in here are for how far it travels inward and outward. And you don't want it too far inward where it's going to push the chain to jump inside. And you don't want it too far outward to where it's going to push the chain to jump outside. So on this front derailleur, it's adjusted properly. My other bike, it was not. It was nowhere even close. So I fixed that on my other bike. So we don't have to mess with these adjustments. Right now we're moving in and outward properly. You want a little slack in this. You know, when I tighten this back up, I left slack in this line because of how far that when you crank it to adjust movement, it needs a little slack. Otherwise, the numbers on the gear shifter up top just do not align properly. You know, when you go cranking for number 2, if you have no slack in there before you get like to 1 1/4, it's already pulling it to the next chain. So you want slack in that, so that way when you click it to the 2, it's on 2. And then from there, when you crank it out to 3, it pretty much puts it on 3 to get to the 3rd derailleur. So now on to the rear. And we want to just make sure that the rear derailleur is moving properly as we move it, as we pedal. So, and like I said, on this derailleur, you have an inward adjustment and an outward adjustment. You don't want it jumping in and wedging between the frame, and you don't want it jumping over and between this plastic and the outer set of teeth here, or the inner, you know what I mean, inside teeth and the outside teeth here. So, same thing. I'm on number 7, and I'm just going to pedal here and see if it moves properly through the gears without, you want, if it's in a gear, you want it to freewheel and not jump off, okay? And you don't want it to be, you know, if you have it in number 7, you don't want it to be trying to go for 6 or to try to jump itself off. So here we're in 7. It seems like the outward most adjustment is in the right position because it's freewheeling nicely. Now I'm going to move to 6. And it jumps up to 6. And it freewheels nicely. Now at 5. And same thing. It's up to 5 and it's freewheeling nicely. 3. Same thing. It's freewheeling nicely. 2. Freewheeling nicely. And the last one. Alright. We've made it all the way through the gears. It's working properly. If you turn it in, it would make it travel. It'll stop the travel from going inwards. So if you turn it clockwise, turn the screw in clockwise, it'll keep it from traveling too far inwards. So if you have a problem with your chain jumping to the inside of this, jumping off and jumping to the inside, your derailleur arm is moving too far inwards. So you want to turn this clockwise to prevent it from going as far in. If it's not going far enough to make it jump up onto the last set here of gears, then you want to turn it counterclockwise to allow it to travel further inward. Get your adjustment set so that way when it's in place that it nicely freewheels. Okay, now same goes for when you are going outwards here, and I'm switching the gears downwards. Okay, when it's all the way in the top gear in number 7, you want it to freewheel properly. Also, you don't want it to jump too far inwards and get wedged between the frame and the gears. So same thing, you want this set, the adjustment set, so it can't come too far out. So you also want to turn that clockwise to stop the movement outwards. If you aren't coming far enough to get onto that last gear, turn it counterclockwise to allow it to move. Pretty simple, but not everybody knows it, you know. And also you got an adjustment here to take slack out of the line if you need to take slack out of the line. And there's also an adjustment up top. Right here, if you have slack in the line, you can actually turn this in and out for an adjustment to get it closer to where it's moving between gears. All right, and that's about it. We've got everything tightened up. We've got all the adjustments made for the derailleurs, for the brakes. Nothing needed for the shock absorber. We changed the position of these the brake lines so they flow better. The seat's on, the reflectors are on. Now the last thing we need to do is air up the tires, because from the factory they don't really come with a lot of pressure. You can see how much I'm squeezing the tire. They probably put just enough to hold the tire to the rim, and that's it. So bring your tires up to the proper pressure. And right on the sidewall, the tire has the pressure that it needs to be. We've got the last zip ties to cut off here. Pull off the paper. Oh yeah, I've noticed one other thing here. I'll get this all pulled off. They got paper everywhere. Little tape residue on the frame. I got all the pieces of paper pulled off. Last one here. Okay, now, one more fork. Now we got that, and I have to put air in the tires. Everything's basically done, but here up in the front, I don't know if you can see it, but this rubber boot is not in place the way it's supposed to be. You can see the rubber boot is actually up, so it's pretty stretchy. It just, you know, it just has to be pushed back down over and made sure it stays fast. Stretch it. Doing this one-handed here. Just want to make sure I got the boot completely over. That's the last thing you want, is the boot to be letting dust and dirt into the forks. Pretty simple, pretty stretchy, just slips right back over. You know, it's not, I guess that's to label rear. They got a little label on the fork here. Now, we're going to just check the tire pressure, add to it if we have to. You know, they to me the tires are a little on the soft side, but I'm also much heavier than my kids. So from the factory, we've got, oops, you can see the gauge here. They put the bare minimum air pressure in the tire, literally, you know, not even 5 pounds. I'm actually going to probably let a little bit out. I'm going to put like 35 or even 30, depending on how rough a ride is for my kids. So, check your tire pressure, because more than likely from the factory, it's wrong. I'm going to do the front one here and wrap it up. Alright, that's it. I hope this video helps you assemble your bike easier and get it done, and get it done right, so that way it rides correctly and stops correctly, and you know, the derailleurs all work properly and all that. You know, it's not just pulling a bike out of a box and throwing a couple things on it. It seems easy because it's a lot more assembled than bikes of years past, but this is how it is, this is how it's done, and it's done properly and it works correctly. I hope this video helps you out. Like, share, and subscribe, because you never know what I'm going to do next. Today I'm doing a video real quick, I'm making this video to show people how to assemble a bicycle.